also with you, again, this isn't something that doesn't happen a lot in comedy now, in that you've come from, you were doing something else, you were doing a real job, and a really real job, in a place that was full of funny people or people being funny, and you see the humanity and the humour in that. But having had that, then coming to comedy, it's a very different perspective, I think, than a lot of.
Like worlds apart.
Yeah.
Worlds apart, and my new show is pretty much about class, right? It's pretty much about that, and finding yourself in places that when doing this job, you never thought you would be, and you've actually got no right to be there, is what you've been told your whole life, right? And then you come into this world and you go, this is great, and everybody's really nice at gigs, and everybody's really helpful, and this is wonderful, and blah, blah, blah. And then you go to the fringe, and you go, oh, I see they went to that school.
Yeah.
They went to that university, or they have that accent, or they have no skin in the game because their parents are millionaires.
Yes.
Right? Whereas you are literally trying to carve a career and make a living, and you, with your voice and your appearance and what you're saying, might not quite fit in to that model of the arts, because unfortunately, and I went to a talk with John Lloyd about this.
Yeah.
John Lloyd, like probably one of the greatest influences in British TV in my lifetime. Like, I'm 44. And somebody said, why don't we write good sitcoms anymore? And I went, well, what used to happen is we'd go down the comedy store and watch people, and we go, they'd be good for that, or they'd be good for that, or they'd be good at writing for spitting image, and they'd see the impressions and stuff. He said, and I loved it. I'd go out and I'd go down there. He goes, and then you start as a runner. Then as you move through up to producer and director, the camera guys are still the same guys. So they'll go, John, because they've been doing it longer than him.
Yeah.
And they'll go, what about this angle? And he'll go, show me it. Oh, you might be right, right? So there's this kind of school, whereas now what happens is kids will say, I want to work in TV production. So they'll take a year out and go to Thailand. Really think about the production aspect in television. And then they'll come back, and then they'll go through this kind of media school training, and then it just becomes an echo chamber with no differing voices coming in. And as much as what they may be educated and they may have the right connections, they've not kind of went out, and then they don't go to comedy clubs at the weekend because they see that as their joy, as their work. So they go for dinner and they go for drinks, and that's great. But if you're working, trying to discover new things to put on television, it can't just be behind a desk reading scripts. It's like a surveyor. A surveyor on a building site can't sit in the head office and try and survey a building. You just can't. He has to go out and measure things. He has to physically see things and touch things to see how things have been put in. So he might not have fitted it, but he can see it, and it's a real thing. And when you've got a voice like this, it's really difficult to break in there. Really, really difficult. And I was very fortunate that this festival, there was a guy who worked at this festival called Stuart years ago, and his mate and him both went to Glasgow Uni. This is where they met. And the mate went through to Edinburgh to work for Off the Kerb. And then he got employed by Off the Kerb, and then Off the Kerb, who are a big agency, kind of started, they kind of do a thing where they build people through the agency. They get different, they shadow people and all that. And I was my agent's first signing.
Right.
And he totally, this is a Northern Irish man who is about 10 years younger than me and would not support my side of Glasgow, right? And I'm a wee little lesbian who supports the opposite side for what he would traditionally support if he was into football. And we are really tight, but he gets me, and that's what's really important. And there's absolutely no class boundary to him. He just goes, that's what you're good at, let's get you in there.
Yeah.
And it's not about, oh, that's not quite for you. It's like, no, you go there and you go and be you. And because you know what, you're different from the rest of them.
Yeah.
And you kind of need someone in your corner like that. It's so, so important.
It's good, and I think that's a really good point about the way TV's changed. Because when John Lloyd was starting out, and even when we were on TV, it was a career, right? So you're at the BBC and you would stay at the BBC, and now people come up and they do a year at the BBC or 2 years at the BBC because they want to then get a job in
Netflix,
a production company or whatever, another company where they'll get paid loads of money. So you don't have that, and exactly that. That's really interesting about. I remember in our TV stuff, the whole crew was a team, and it was, a lot of different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And the camera guys and the guy, there were guys knocking up the sets, and and you were all coming in with ideas.
Yeah, and you're sitting there as the talent.
Yeah.
But these guys have especially because you guys were young.
We were young. Once upon a time.
Once upon a time. But that is the type of thing that you really need at that age as well, especially.
Definitely, yeah.
Guys on cameras who had worked on cameras for Morecambe and Wise, going, that's really great, that's really different, and it's something that they wouldn't necessarily have seen before, but they're looking through the lens and they can really then advise you and advise the producer and the director, and then they kind of go, yeah, actually that's going to work. And that type of experience is timeless, and I feel we've lost it, and now the gatekeepers have been removed by social media.
Yeah.
So people are just in their bedrooms. Pout their arms must be killing you. Like we're going to grow up with a generation of just really toned one arm and big thumbs. But yeah, and it's when you do go to Edinburgh for the first time, and I was very fortunate, the stand very much, before I had an agent and stuff, put his arms around me and really nurtured me, because the stand do that, and they really nurture talent. And once I got in, because it took me 18 months to get in there, it was almost like there was another comedian blocking my path, but whoever knows. But when I got in there, Tommy and Eva really curated me and really looked after me and really put me through the stand very quickly to headliner. Really, about 3.5 years it took from the minute I entered. But you kind of need those people backing you.
You do, but also you were very quickly very talented. Everyone says that, and I saw you, I guess, around about that time. I'm not sure when I first saw you, but it was clear you'd got it. But also you were selling tickets. People would come. You started selling venues out like instantaneously. Yeah. So you created an audience. Once you've created that audience in that way, people have to stand up and take notice of.
Yeah, and they did, to be fair. And Tommy was involved with the festival back then, and a woman called Sarah Watson as well. And Tommy literally, I didn't know this until like 2 years ago, literally phoned her up and went, I have just seen this woman who's basically the female Raymond Mills. You need to go and see her. And then me and Raymond ended up in Australia together, and we just looked like a lesbian couple, right? But, and that really kind of helped start that trajectory. But also, with those people backing you and having a festival in your own city, it gave me a platform and a desire to write, because I had to write for something. And the first time, people talk about the first time you play the stand and all that. I can't remember the first time I played the Glasgow stand, but I remember my first solo show in the Glasgow stand, and I could probably go around and do it right now. I remembered it so much. So, yeah, I was very, very fortunate, and I was really well backed, because I worked in the gay scene when I was young, so I knew a lot of people in the gay scene, not in that carnal way, just by serving them alcohol. And they were really, really supportive. And then people just in life, and I think if you try and be a good person in life, people will 100% back you if you try and do something that they just think is unimaginable.
Well, I think it's interesting because you are, I think comedians all really like you. You haven't, you've been often someone gets very successful quickly, and there's a bit of resentment from other comedians. It feels like there isn't with you. It feels like people, accept what you've done. I don't know if you feel that way.
Yeah, I do. Christopher MacArthur Boyd spoke to me about this. He goes, I think you were the kind of last one that curated an audience by gigging.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's now socials and clips. He goes, I feel that you were the last one that you went constantly just done a new show year after year, done a new show, and you've always tried to forge your own path. And I was like, well, I have, but I've had to do that my whole life. You know, I have, and not in a kind of woe's me way, but, you know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. It wasn't particularly great to be gay back then. My parents really struggled with it to the point I had to leave the house, and then, you know, worked in the gay scene and then left that, and it was a very long-term relationship, and then, you know, went and been an apprentice in my early 20s to become an electrician. You know, life is hard, and I think there's a certain thing that if you just try and be a good person, and if you get success, try and give people a lift up. You know, use them as a support act. If their act can complement your act, use them as a support act in a big theatre, or take them on tour with you, or give them advice. You know, it's the ones that when you give advice to, and they just go, all right, and then go, I'll be better than her. Then you go, oh, right, okay. But yeah, I think just try and be a decent person.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, look, yeah, there we go. Four decent people in the audience agree with you.
Also, if you're not a decent person in this city, we will leather you. I mean,